You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
Good evening, everyone. This is the African Queen, and you are listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams, and this is Taboo Talk. You can find Power Plug Radio on, I always mess this up, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us in the Apple Store, the Android Store. You can also find us on Alexa by just saying, "Hey Alexa, start Power Plug Radio." And you can also find us on YouTube. And if all else fails, go to www.powerplugradio.com. And you can listen to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That is my first time doing it without messing up. So welcome, everybody. I hope everyone had a nice, safe, and enjoyable Thanksgiving weekend. We did here at Power Plug Radio, and we want to say thank you for joining us tonight. And we have a topic for you tonight, and the topic is, why are we still talking about abortions? When it comes to female reproductive rights, in the United States, it's always been a hot topic for the most part. Women don't really have too much of a say. We're told what we can and cannot do. And so tonight we're going to talk about the topic of abortion. And we have our guest host who is actually in the studio with us tonight. Hello, LaDon.
What's up, African Queen?
It's a lot.
What's up to all the humans, or however you self-identify?
So we started talking about this topic. We've had conversations on and off. We actually talked about it a little bit over the Thanksgiving holiday, and of course the topic comes up quite often. And I asked LaDon on our way here to the studio, what made him make his decision on what side of the road he was on when it came to abortion, when he did understand what abortion was. So when did you decide? Were you always pro-choice? Were you always pro-life? How'd you make that choice and decision?
Realistically, I learned about abortion from my mother. So she was pro-choice. So from what I learned, I was pro-choice. But in the time that I learned about abortion, there was no such thing as pro-choice or pro-life. That was something that came politically later on in the 80s. So as a child, I just thought this was just a normal thing, a procedure, just a medical procedure.
Okay. That
if you needed it, you had it done. If you didn't, you didn't.
But my first time hearing about it was probably, and me understanding what it was probably in the late 70s when I was educated on Roe versus Wade, and to understand everything that was going on with women who making choices and all that kind of stuff. And
you learned about Roe versus Wade in the 70s?
No, I'm not saying. I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
Oh, I was like, you was a smarty art kid. You one of those brainiac right there.
Well, no, I remember my mother talked to me about a lot of different things, and I remember she would talk to me about, she just talked to me about stuff, and I would listen in a manner that I could understand. And I remember being told that abortion rights was something that a woman should have a right to make a choice on. But in many times throughout history, that choice was taken away. It would be taken away, and then it would come back, and then they would regulate it, and and things like that. I kind of understood what it was, and my mom started talking to me about it because I was becoming a woman was the term that was used, and she wanted me to understand not only the consequences of sex, but the choices if you were to become pregnant. So I remember listening to it, and I remember being horrified when she explained to me actually what an abortion was, and me thinking that was just the most cruel thing that you could ever do, because I was a young girl, and you showed me a baby, and I was just like, oh, can I play with it? Right. So, for you to tell me what an abortion was, I was like, oh, that's just horrible, but once I got older, and I better understood not just what the procedure was, but the reasons for women who get them, then I was like, okay, now I get it, So I guess technically you could say I was kind of anti-abortion, but it's because I thought you was just killing all these cute little babies. So I didn't get it in the beginning.
Okay.
But once I came of age, and then I remember I had to do a report, and the teacher said, pick a topic, something that's going to be thought provoking. And at the time, my mother was running one of the only teen pregnancy programs here in St. Petersburg. It was Project Help at the YWCA of Tampa Bay. And because I would be around those girls all the time, they would talk about their choices and why they didn't choose to have an abortion. And for many of them, it was a choice, but it wasn't, because for many of them, it was just the fear of going to their parent or parents and saying, hey, I'm pregnant, I need to have an abortion. But, the other side to that was you ain't tell them, and by the time you did get the guts to tell them, it was too late. So I remember hearing that and going, okay, you know what? I'm going to start doing some research on this, and I'm actually going to do a report, which I got a good grade on, but my teacher wasn't too happy about my topic.
Okay. So did your teacher feel that your topic was too serious?
My teacher was pro-life.
Okay.
And I was arguing the point in my paper that a woman has the right to choose what she wants done to her body.
So this is what, the 80s, 90s?
This was the 80s. This was actually my freshman year in high school. So this had to be like 1984, 85.
Okay.
And my teacher was not happy with me. So she gave me a good grade because I did the research and my spelling was on point and all of that. But there was a nice note written on there on the report. And it was sent back to my mother, who had to sign it. Mm-hmm. And my mother read it and was like, the fuck?
Well, I want to just, I understand. Was your teacher upset because that you wrote a paper about abortion? Or was your teacher disappointed or upset about your stance on abortion?
So here's the part. If you asked her in the way she talked to me, she told me that she felt that topic was too much for a 9th grade paper, even though she said, pick a controversial topic that you can argue. Okay. So, but when you read the little thing that she wrote on the paper that my mom had to sign off on, which, by the way, my mother refused to sign off on, as you read the little paragraph, you realized that she was upset because she believed in pro-life instead of pro-choice.
So she was upset at your stance on
it. Yeah.
She wrote about
she said she was, because I wrote about what it really was my stance. Okay. And I remember her saying that my mother should not put her influence on me, because she basically was saying that I was thinking that way because my mother made me think that way.
But she thought her way because her mother made her think. I mean,
well, we don't know that.
We learn, but most of our ideals come from our parents.
Most of the time, but not all the time.
So,
my
point is, especially as a child, most of your ideals come from what your parents believe. So, it's kind of hypocritical is my point.
It is. But a lot of pro-life people are hypocritical. And so are pro-choice people. But yeah. So, I was looking back through basically a timeline of abortions here just in the United States. Russia actually was the first country to legalize abortion. But in the United States, from 1820 to 1830, herbs were used to induce abortion. But unfortunately, with these herbs, many women died. So you see a series of regulations and laws that were put in place through poison control measures to stop women from using these herbs. Connecticut was the first state to pass statutory abortion regulation banning the use of poisons to induce abortions after quickening. And for those who don't know what quickening is when the first time a woman can feel the baby actually flutter or move. So as long as you did it before that.
I did not know that.
Yes, that's what quickening is. It's the flutter or the movement of the baby.
Okay.
And so as long as you did it before that, you were cool. But in 1821 in Connecticut, if you did it after that, the punishment was a life sentence.
Life sentence in prison?
In jail, yes.
Yeah, all right.
Right. So that was in 1821. And if you go through this, they said in 1857, the American Medical Association began a campaign to criminalize abortion. Mm-hmm. Now here's one that got me when I read it. Okay. The Catholic Church did not condemn abortion until 1869. And the way you hear Catholics talk, it's just always been that way. So it wasn't until 1869 that the Catholic Church actually condemned abortions. And you can go on. I mean, if you look at some of these tools, they're horrific. Like, yeah, this looks like something you would use to plow a field. And these are the tools that are used to for abortions, which, yeah, these tools right here scare me. That's all you'd have to do is just show this picture. The first woman was arrested in 1916 for opening the first birth control clinic in Brooklyn, which was the predecessor to Planned Parenthood.
Really?
Yes.
What was it called?
It doesn't have a name of the clinic. Her name was Margaret Sanger. And in 1930, abortion is the official cause of death of 2,700 women, nearly 1/5 of all maternal deaths that year. And it was because they were getting the back alley abortions. So unsanitary. They were either dying on the table or dying from infections. And it's just been kind of a back and forth since then. And to the point where oral contraceptions at one point were deemed illegal for a short period of time. So basically they said you can't use contraception, condoms, pills, whatever. You get pregnant, you gotta have a baby. So women just really had no choice. And it's just kind of been going back and forth since then. A Los Angeles hospital admitted 701 women with septic abortions that year, which is 1968. Approximately one admission for every 14 deliveries that they had. It just keeps going. And you would think in 1971, the Supreme Court agrees to hear the case, which her name was Norma McCorvey, but she went by Jane Roe, against Henry Wade, the Dallas DA who enforced a Texas law, Texas again, banning abortion except in the cases of a life endangerment. At least that one's better than the law they have now. So in 1972, that's the case of Roe versus Wade.
So Roe existed because she didn't want to use her real name at the time.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So now that you know about the history of abortion and some of the the terrible tools used historically. Yep. And then the benefits, I guess, of said abortions or medical procedure. How do you feel now?
100, because that's what I'm always on this show. I believe that a woman should have a right to be able to choose. And I've actually used that right to choose. I have been pregnant twice in my life. And the first time that I got pregnant, for a brief moment, I contemplated my choices. And I chose not to. But I was able to make that choice. Mm-hmm. I feel that a woman should have that right to choose. And I've heard of when my mom was working at running Project Help, the stories that came out of that school over the years. I remember there was one young lady who very, very early on in her pregnancy found out that her babies did not have a complete skull, and the baby would not live. And so the doctor said that for the baby would live but would be in constant pain, and the doctor immediately recommended for her to be able to have an abortion. She chose to do it, but because of her age, she had to have parental permission, and her parents said no. Her parents said you were
somebody you went to school with?
No, it was someone who went to my mother's school that she ran.
Gotcha.
And I remember my mom being so upset, because basically their reasoning for her not having the abortion was you was grown enough to get pregnant, then you need to deal with the consequences of this. And I remember it sat with me because I remember the doctor my mom coming back and telling me that the doctor told them that the baby would probably only live for a few days, but would suffer in pain the whole time. And you want to teach a girl a lesson by making her carry a baby that she knows is going to die, and that the baby is going to suffer until it dies. And I just remember just like that, that's something I'll never forget. And I will never know what she felt like. She ended up carrying the baby for 7 months.
Did you ever find out why? Like, why were her parents opposed to this? Is this religious reasons? Was it political? Was it?
No, we never, I never found out why. I don't know if that was something that was ever shared with my mother. I know the young lady did choose, after having the baby, about 6 months later, she chose to start going out and sharing her story. Mm-hmm. It completely changed her relationship with her parents. They were mad and angry with her because you got to now this was in the early to mid 80s. So this was when the whole teen pregnancy thing was still very embarrassing, and where today it's more normalized for young girls to get pregnant, unfortunately. And so I don't know if it was used as a learning lesson that they thought was the best thing to do. I don't know. I just know, to me, it was cruel.
As I got older, I was always suspicious of how abortion was politicized. Like I said, when I learned about it, it was just a medical procedure.
Right.
All right. But I didn't realize until, I would say, even the 80s and Reaganomics and a real push for the conservative right and family values, etc., that I was a little sus about how pro-life they were and how anti-abortion. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand anti-abortion, but I think the argument that a lot of people who are on the other side politically, they want pro-choice. Not that they are advocating for everyone to get abortions.
Right.
But they want people to have the rights
to make that choice. Right.
And I always found it suspicious, and it wasn't until recently that I learned that this is kind of an idea that came out of fear. Fear that the United States would be less Western.
Meaning?
And I would say American white.
Right. Okay.
Right. So it was said way back in, I would say in the early 20th century, President Roosevelt had touched on subjects like race suicide. There was this fear that at that time that American people would be the people of race decadence, and the inevitable consequence would be low birth rates. So if marriages did not produce a number of children,
okay,
then the non-Western at that time, the Germans, the Slavics, they would eventually achieve world dominance and outpopulate the rest of the world. Even Jack London, the author of Call in the Wild. He actually raised people's fear about Asian population overcoming Western civilization.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
So when these fears were coming up, was it during something like during a time of war when these groups were in places of power, or like
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
But the influence of these just different civilizations were used to justify why Westerners needed to procreate more,
Okay.
right? So it was more of a fear of we would be outpopulated, and that kind of thought
You said we, you mean
we as an Americans.
oh, okay. All right.
So the fear, this whole idea of conservatives being pro-life kind of rang like an echo of that.
Okay.
So I think the fear again that white American civilization or culture would die out if they didn't promote more people to not have abortions.
Okay.
So I like I said, I was always suspicious of that, and that kind of seemed to hold because we talked in the past the idea of pro-life and pro-choice. Pro-life only exists because of an idea to try to stop people from having abortions to make sure that Western civilization, American white people, would thrive. And pro-choice was like, well, no, we already have this thing. It's called abortion. It's legal. We've always had this. Why are we now creating something, or why are we politicizing this? And that was just something that always made me sus.
I understand why. You know, as a woman, there's so many different situations that we can be put into that I'll say for me personally would actually make me hard consider having an abortion. And then there are certain situations that no, because I remember I knew a young lady when I was in high school, and basically she just had sex when she wanted to, and when she got pregnant, she got an abortion. It was basically a form of birth control for her.
Yeah, of course, I knew young ladies.
Yeah, you know, and now, you know, from my understanding, I have not seen her in years, but from now, because of the amount of procedures that she had, when she was ready to have children, she couldn't get pregnant. Which, you know, was a consequence of her earlier actions.
Yikes.
You know, and I was always against the using abortion as a form of birth control.
Right.
But, you know, being raped, being molested, you know, why? And there are states that will force a woman, even if she was raped, to still have the baby and give the rapist parental rights.
That was a workaround because Roe versus Wade was a federal law, right?
Yes.
So the workaround was to then allow states the ability to make their own decisions
Yes.
around this federal law. So
Which is
that's
it's a rubber band up and down because you know, these laws change, they come and go depending on who's in power at the time. So you'll see, like right now, what Texas has done around abortions has basically made it a free for all. So like if I suspect that somebody had an abortion, I could turn them in and get paid.
right.
You know, I don't even realize, I don't, because what proof could they have? You know, oh, I saw her walking into an abortion clinic. Well, there's no such thing as just an abortion clinic. They're usually Planned Parenthood, where you can go in for so many things other than just an abortion. So, you know, now I could get mad and people can weaponize this. And so, it's, and the people who are making these laws, who are making these decisions are largely men who are making decisions for a woman's body, whether it is contraceptives, abortion, everything. It's like, how is it that a man, y'all don't go through what we go through? You don't know. Even to the point of the period tax, it's just, when it comes down to all of these things.
I'm sorry, you said period tax?
Right. So what a lot of people don't realize is that things that women have to use during their cycle are taxed. And for some women, just that little bit of tax that's put on top of your sanitary napkins, your tampons, things like that.
Where is this at?
It's all over the United States. They're taxed.
Is this a federal thing or statewide?
I believe it's a state by state thing, but most states do it. And most people don't realize it because, as a daddy, it's not like you're going to look at your receipt and go, oh, they taxed me for these tampons for my 15-year-old. You get it when you go to the grocery store, you buy the stuff, it's on there, you pay tax. Do you really know that you pay tax on the tampons unless you just got the tampons by themselves? No, you really don't know. Most states do. But the thing is that other contraceptives that men use are not taxed. There are many things that females have to use that for us to be to have a clean hygiene, they're taxed. Where for men, many of those things are not taxed. And these are little things, like it used to be, not used to be, to this day, you can't pay for, insurance will not pay for your abortion, but it'll pay for Viagra. And so it's like, so in so many different ways, you're hitting a wall after wall after wall when it comes to being a woman, when it comes to your reproductive rights. And then even if you take it even further, if I call, let's say it was a young woman who gets raped, it's the woman who has to prove it. And so we have so many things. So then not only does she have to prove it, but in some states, if she becomes pregnant, she will be forced to carry that pregnancy out. And in some states, that the man who raped her will have the right to be able to say, I want to be a part of this kid's child, which means for the rest of your life, you got to look at the person who raped you.
So this, it sounds like at the cornerstone of this argument of abortion or pro-abortion is misogyny.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't really have a stance one way or another. I believe because it exists, it's a choice, it's an option, it's a medical procedure. I'm not pro-life, whatever that means. I'm pro-life because I want life to live. I want people to live, but it was always hypocritical for people who claim to be pro-life to also be for the death penalty. So they're not pro-life. They just want to make sure that Western culture continues on in the way that they expect it to. So
I know one of the things that always you'll hear a person who is pro-choice, the argument they'll make, and there's been so many editorial cartoons based off of this, is that you're pro-life until the baby is born. These pro-life people are pro-life until the baby's born. And then once the baby's born, then they turn on the parents. So it's like, you need to have that baby. They stand up there, they protest. And sometimes these people who protest out in front of these Planned Parenthood clinics, the pictures that they hold up are horrible. The things that they say to these women. As we know, there was a series for years of Planned Parenthood clinics and clinics that did abortions were firebombed, and doctors and people who work there have been killed or hurt, or threatened. So but it's crazy because yes, if you look at it, the whole time the girl is pregnant, the woman is pregnant, they're saying no, pro-life, 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 the life of the baby, and the baby needs the life, and then the baby's born, and then they're going, look at you, you're on welfare, and then you're taking this you know. And so it's like, come on, you got to pick a side. You can't have it both ways. So we're going to pick this up right after our music break, so please stay and listen to a couple of good songs, and hang in there. We'll be back in about 8 minutes.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. Listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
Michaels, made by you.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. You're listening to Power Plug Radio. Home of your throwback jams.
Let's scan and go.
Then let's do it.
Power Plug Radio. Home of your throwback jams.
Welcome back. Welcome back. You are listening to Taboo Talk on Power Plug Radio. This is the African Queen, and in the studio today we have our guest host LaDon from the land, and we are talking.
I mean, it's Cleveland.
It was the land. Come on now, you know. We the bird, so y'all the land. So and we're talking about abortion, and why are we still talking about abortion in 2021? Why is this even a reason to, you know, a topic of conversation? I mean, I have he's 29 now, but I remember when my son was a teenager, I remember talking to him about it, and as a parent, it was, you know, I allowed him to ask questions and be curious about it. I told him that if he was by chance to get a girl pregnant, it was going to be his responsibility. They were going to make the decision together, and they were going to raise the baby together, or they was going to split that bad boy 50-50 and take care of it.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, as a woman, that's a whole nother topic. But as a woman, no, he was going to do that because I know what it felt like to be a single mom without any help from the father. And I wasn't going to let him be that person.
I understand.
But, you know, I mean, I was never the mother, the parent of daughters. You are. Mm-hmm. So right now, I know a lot of times people will say something, oh yeah, this is how I feel, until it becomes real life for them. What is your stance when it comes to your girls? If that was a situation for your girls?
To be honest, I would. There's no right answer.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The fact that we do have the choice, that's fine. And for that reason, I'm pro-choice because I want the option. But if, let's say my teenage daughter got pregnant, I would try my best to educate her and let her come to her own conclusion.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah. But I would fully lay out the consequences of her action or inaction and what to expect. So who's to say that the struggle that she'll go through or the pain that she may endure from whatever decision she makes, one thing is I'll be there.
Right. Yes.
So it'll be hard, but it won't be insurmountable.
Yeah.
So,
I know, for me, when I got pregnant with my daughter, I was 19. I remember I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, oh crap, okay. And I went through the whole thing, and I think I realized that I was pregnant, and I kind of ignored it at first, right? Mm-hmm. And so then when I finally was like, you know what, I can't be playing like this. Right. I went and I had the test, and it came back that it was positive, and I immediately went to a very, very good adult friend of mine.
Okay. And
I told her, and then I very quickly said after that, can I come live with you?
So you did not go to your parents?
I did not go to my mother. You got to remember now, my mom was running Project Help, or she was still at the Y. But anyway, my mom had run Project Help.
She was running a program
for teen pregnancy.
And her teenage daughter
who got pregnant. I was 19. I was not in high school.
Yeah, that's like
right. So I remember I went to my friend, and I said, hey, and she was a very good friend. I looked up to her, and she was an adult. I mean, when I say adult, she wasn't like 4 or 5 years older than me. She was in her mid to late 30s. And I went to her and I told her, and she was like, okay. And then I immediately said, you got 3 extra rooms. Can't I just come live with you? And she said, no, we're going to call your mother. So she called my mom and was like, hey, and and can you come over? And so my mom came, and there I sat. And I told my mom that I was pregnant. And she immediately said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to call, and we're going to have call and set up for you to have an abortion, and blah, 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 blah. There was no choice given to me.
Wait, what now? You told your mama.
I told my mama.
And she was like,
okay. So the next step is
we're going to undo this.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so
the mama who ran the teen pregnancy program.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
So, and my mom was cool. She was fine until I told her that I was 4 months pregnant. And then my mama didn't speak to me for the next month and a half.
So in your head, you still kind of wrestled whether you wanted to keep the baby or not. And then you just said, you know what? I really want to keep this baby.
I think that what I did was, honestly, what I did was I ignored it to the point because I did want to keep it. And I unconsciously waited to officially find out I was pregnant until it was at a point where I could not.
Or you subconsciously waited.
Or, I'm sorry, I subconsciously waited.
Or, you could have your mama could have knocked you out, and then you were unconsciously waiting.
And my mom was, and you know what? I'm sorry. I said that story wrong. This was when I was pregnant the second time. I was pregnant the second time that this happened. And I remember I told her, my mom, she told me off. Uh-huh. I went home, went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, there was a list of things that I needed to do. I needed to sign up for Medicaid. I needed to do this, do this, do that. My mother did not speak to me for a month and a half. I mean, like literally, we lived in the same house. She never uttered a word to me. And then I knew she had accepted it because I came home one day and there was all these baby clothes on my bed. But the part that sat with me for a long time was what she said to me in the beginning did not give me a choice. She wasn't asking me, do you? That's why when you said what you said a few minutes ago about, laying everything out with your daughter and then allowing her to make her choice, my choice was, we gonna do this so you can move on with your life.
So do you believe that states are now just, so one of the things I noticed that for states, even though Roe versus Wade exists, right? And legally, abortion is legal in the United States. But I noticed that some of these states who are opposed to the choice of abortion,
right?
Not the actual idea, I'm just saying the choice of abortion, have cut their funds, have limited the facilities and clinics that can perform abortions.
Yes.
Or have outright, like you said, in Texas,
create bounty hunters,
created actual laws that incentivize people to actually snitch on people getting abortion.
Yeah.
Or make it extremely difficult, whereas you have to get an abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, whereas many women don't even know that they're pregnant.
They don't.
At 6 weeks.
Nope.
So as a person, as a man, as a heterosexual, cisgendered, middle-aged black man, I don't like my options taken away from me. I don't like when people take my choices away.
Right.
So I think that's why I was always pro-choice. Now, with that said, how did you feel? So you felt as a 19 or an early
19.
Yeah, as a teenager. You're still a teenager.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'm assuming you're living with your parents.
I was living with my mother.
Your options, your choices were taken away.
They would have been if I wasn't too far. It didn't hit me then. It didn't hit me in that moment. Because as soon as she said it, I knew that I was going to have to tell her, well, I'm X amount of months pregnant, which threw that out the window.
Right.
It honestly didn't hit me until after I had my son. And I kind of sat back and thought about it. And it wasn't a good feeling. It was like, okay, I get why she said it. I understand as a parent somewhat why she said it, because in her eyes, my life was going to be so much harder as a single mom than it would have been without.
So allow me to add, but there is another consequence, even if you had an abortion, and that would be the pain of knowing that you had an abortion.
Yes.
Right? So the thing is, we don't know. That's what I'm saying. There's no real right or wrong answer, but I still believe people need their options available to them.
I agree. And you brought up a really good point, because like I said, I was pregnant one time before, and I lost that child at 8 months. And I remember talking about it and someone saying, well, it's the same. I was like, no, it's not. I said, because I didn't choose.
Right.
I didn't choose that.
That wasn't your option.
But to have an abortion would have been a choice.
Right.
And I honestly don't know how that would have affected me to have had one after losing one, being made to have one after losing one. And I didn't have to be made to have it. I could have been like, I'm not doing it. And the minute I said I ain't doing it, she'd have been like, pack your shit and get out, And so there's always consequences to your actions. Cool. And like I said, my mother and I, at a later time, had a conversation to resolve our feelings, both of us, around this, because for a very long time, even though my son is the apple of my mother's eye,
okay,
she still was very angry with me for years after having him, for having him. even though she loved him the way she did. And she tells this story all the time where she had to resolve that within herself to say, how can I be angry at her for giving me this child that I love so much? But that was something she had to resolve within herself. And then she turned around and, you know, her and I talked about it and we went through blah, blah, blah to get to a point where we were both good. Because the pain of what she said to me the day I told her sat with me for a very long time.
Well, I'm glad you had the options, and I'm glad you made the decision. You have a wonderful son.
Yes, he's the bomb.
He's an admirable young man. I'm sure you're very proud.
I am.
But with that said, bringing it back to our original question, so why are we talking about this still? Why are we still talking about abortion?
Because
here's my, it's more rhetorical, I'm asking this. But here's my idea.
Good gracious.
Once you give people something,
yes,
it's hard to take it away.
Yes.
Right? If abortion was always illegal, then I think over time people would have accepted it. But now that you've given people the option, will we ever overturn Roe versus Wade?
Giving the people what option? You mean giving them the option to be able to choose?
Over Roe versus Wade, will it ever be undone in the United States?
It's close to it right now. That's why we're still talking about it. I mean, because they may not be. So here's the thing. One or two things will happen. Either each conservative state will pass laws like you can't get an abortion after 6 weeks, which that means basically you just can't get one. Or they'll do what many states have done where some women have to travel hundreds. And in Texas's case, some have to travel over 1,000 miles to get to the closest abortion clinic. Or if we end up with an extremely conservative Supreme Court, they could overturn Roe versus Wade.
I believe we have that now, though, right?
But we have a conservative Supreme Court, but we still have some of those conservatives who have common sense. So just because you're conservative doesn't mean you're pro-life. Not all conservative people are pro-life.
Okay.
But all you got to do is get the right president to line up and have that lucky draw, because see, that's what the Orange Minion thought he was doing. But some of the people he put onto the Supreme Court didn't actually vote the way he wanted them to vote. And he didn't really care about abortion because that man probably done paid for so many abortions. It's ridiculous.
Sure he has.
But, it's just going to take a perfect storm. And we know those perfect storms can happen. And abortion rights could be taken away. I mean, what's the name of the show on Hulu?
Yep.
Oh,
that one.
What's the name of the show? And the women, a whole bunch of women came to Congress dressed like The Handmaid's Tale.
The Handmaid's Tale.
So if and the reason why all of the women came to, they've come to several different state legislators and dressed that way, and they've also come to Congress and to the Senate dressed that way. It's because our laws that are being changed and manipulated are getting us closer and closer to a Handmaid's Tale.
But I don't think the public will ever go for it. Again, what you're talking about is politicians.
They don't have to go for it.
What you're talking about is politicians making this decision. But I think the general public, because again, this is something that we have now, you're not going to be able to undo it. Like if you give me $1 million, it's going to be hard prying it from me. If I never get $1 million, I'll live. My life will go on. But if you give me $1 million and you try to take it away, it's going to be a problem.
Here's the thing, though. We probably could have said that before 9/11. But the perfect storm happened. We had to quote unquote, write people up in Washington and look at the laws that came out of the Patriot Act. Look at what could possibly happen right now. You get the right lineup of white men in power laws can be changed. And because those men are in power, the people can argue all they want, because we also know that there aren't that many senators and congressmen who vote the way of their constituents all the time.
That's a good point. Unfortunate, but true.
I mean, and that's the sad and scary part. So I want to read a comment that we have on Facebook from Barrett Lancaster, one of my old, I mean, we've been from the book face. We've been friends since the 3rd grade. He said, Margaret Singer, aka racist feminist, and author of Planned Parenthood, white population's been on the decrease since 2000, and African Americans in the increase since 2000, and other races are increasing too. By 2050, white Americans will not be the majority in America anymore. Funny thing is, white people at 60% now have 84% of the wealth in America. This is why I think abortion is still relevant. Personally, we aborted our first child, and we hate that we decided to do that. I know that would have been my daughter.
So that commenter is kind of piggybacking on the fear,
yes,
or the idea that this whole idea of getting rid of the choice or the option of abortion is the fear of
America becoming very brown,
or beige,
beige,
country,
right?
And I even found out recently about a book called The Birth Dearth that echoes that sentiment of this fear of, if we don't keep producing, then they will outnumber us.
Right.
And the truth is, now we're not looking at humanity as humans. We're looking at white culture versus non-white Western culture versus non-white Western culture. And that is the scary thing about general abortion.
And here's the crazy thing about that book, was one of the things that we were talking about on Thanksgiving, is that if you go to Amazon right now, there's only one copy of that book left. And I think it had gone up to $3,000 for the book. It's now sitting at $4.99, so $500 for one copy. You cannot find that book anywhere, but that book is the blueprint that the conservative parties are using, and they always use the argument, and the argument is always used that, you know, there are more black people on welfare, more black people get abortions, blah blah blah, and that's not true. More white women have abortions than women of color.
But statistically, it'd have to be
right, and but that's the scary part for them.
If every black person in the United States was on welfare, that would still be 12% of the population. So,
but you know, you have to sit back and think about it. Is that, you know, you turn around and if you make them think we're doing this for the betterment of the, you know, the po folk, we're trying to help them out, then they're gonna go, oh yeah, we're all for this, and not until the laws have changed that then they gonna turn around and realize, well, wait a minute, that affected me.
Right.
So, you know, this is a topic, as with many of our topics, that we could continue to go on and on and on about, but it is time for us to go, and we will pick this topic up again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for LaDon flying in from Cleveland.
Oh, thank you for having me, African Queen.
And so you are listening to Taboo Talk on Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.